Hey, good morning, everybody. I am not Ricardo. My name is Sarah, and I'm here to introduce one of our diamond sponsors of Dare to Be Great. So, a huge thank you to InDigital for being a diamond sponsor. And today we have Kurt Wolfenberger, who is a next gen core services engineer with InDigital, and he's going to talk to us today about ransomware. So, Kurt, your video's been kind of in and out, which is okay. We can see your slides, and that's fine. If we have any kind of technical difficulty, I'll jump in and help you out. But for now, thank you and take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. As far as video issues, I'd rather not be seen on video, so we can let that go away. I'm glad you can see the slide deck. As Sarah mentioned, I am a systems engineer within Digital, and really throughout a majority of my career, I've been involved in the public safety community in one way or another. But I think even a little bit further than that, I've also been one of the people who have had to utilize the services from 911. Well, actually, my wife had to dial 911 I'd say 10 years ago when I fell out of a tree, inverted, and landed headfirst without any protection at all. So I took a dive and landed on a root bed of a tree, headfirst, pretty severe trauma, and interesting, I didn't break my neck or my skull, didn't fracture, but I shattered my tibia. So it was quite an ordeal, but that's really my driving force behind doing what I do as an engineer at InDigital. Delivering a call is our priority, it's my priority. I understand what it feels like to need help and not have anybody around to get you that help. So I did a program with Sarah Lancaster, who took the 911 call from my wife and ended up dispatching and coordinating a helicopter flight for me, which was probably the most expensive helicopter flight I've ever had. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000, but the Within the Trenches podcast episode is episode 145. If you have a chance and you want to hear the rest of that story, I suggest you dial into Ricardos Within the Trenches Media podcast page and find episode 145. It's a neat conversation between Sarah, who took my call, and me about what was happening in her mind, and knowing me because I spent a lot of time in the dispatch center in my hometown, and then realizing that it was me who had fallen on my head, and that she even knew my wife. So she maintained the typical professionalism that you all do when you take those calls. So thank you for that. And please take some time and listen to that program. But beyond that connection to public safety, in an effort to qualify myself to talk about the things that I'm going to talk to you about this morning, my qualifications are generally the school of real life. And to give you a brief career history, after some excitement in the military, I went to work for a Midwest-based telephone company, which led me to another role at a two-way radio shop, where I was responsible for building telephony networks and radio over IP networks. And that ended up with me meeting some folks from InDigital, and I just saw their passion and I just really wanted to work there. So over a period of a few months, I ended up taking another job at InDigital, and for the last 15 years or so, I've been directly involved in one way or another with all aspects of emergency services IP networks and the call handling systems that depend upon them to get those calls delivered. So in this session, I'm going to talk about some very serious problems that you're all going to face in the future. And it really won't matter what type of system that you're using, whether it's a legacy system or next gen system, because they're all going to fail you at some point, whether it's it's a planned outage for maintenance or some carrier problem in the network, your systems will go down. Um, and let's face it, when a dispatch center is unable to receive calls, whether they're 911 or administrative calls, there's really not much that you can do to help the people in the communities that you serve. And I know some of you may have backup systems that are in place, backup voice systems, but typically when that host controller is down or the host that's feeding your system is unavailable, the backup systems are also connected to those hosts, so you're pretty much out of luck. And some of the dispatch centers that I've been in also have cell phones on the desk, which is, you got to turn them on, you got to make sure that the calls are processing on those, and it's just a pain. And the bottom line is it's not a scalable solution, and it's really not efficient for you guys to use either. So you may need to brace yourselves, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, and it's going to sound ridiculous to some of you, but nevertheless, your dispatch center should never be without communication systems. There should never be a time when your telephone systems don't work for you or your 911 trunks are down. There's always a way to get around issues in the network. From a 911 system service provider perspective, we have the capabilities to access communication systems and services from a plethora of different places, VoIP providers, other telephone companies. So every single 911 system service provider should be able to deliver you service as far as voice communications capabilities at any PSAP, anywhere, anytime, bottom line. And really today, everything that would be used to make these things happen is really generally inexpensive, generally available off the shelf, and the technologies and methods themselves, they're not overly advanced. I mean, my nickname at work, I hate to even share this with you, but they call me plug and play, because when I engineer something, in my mind, it's just simply going to work because I've got a crew of guys behind me who know how to access those resources. So plug and play. Let's don't wear that out. That's kind of an unusual nickname, but I digress. So let's take a look at a major event that can and has shut down communication centers. And even better, let's look at some of the systems, or a system that you have available or can have available to give you the peace of mind and confidence that you need to be able to dispatch during systems failures. So imagine, if you will, you're sitting down for your shift, and you're looking at a clean desktop, and then you move on to double clicking the login shortcut for your 911 application. But something unexpected pops up. What do you do when you don't get what you expected when you access, when you're doing anything, but specifically your 911 application or any application? What do? Maybe you try restarting the application, close it, relaunch it, or maybe you turn off the whole computer. Or maybe you call your IT group or the vendor who sold you the system. Or maybe you hit it, kick it, or do something else to help it work. So what happens when you see something beyond that that really makes your heart miss a beat, or maybe stop for a moment and causes your breath to flee? You know that feeling when you're working on a large file or a large project in Microsoft Word or whatever your word processing application is, or your Excel, and maybe you had forgotten to save it over the several hours that you've been working on it, or days even, if you just closed the lid and continued working. You know that feeling that you get when you see that message that pops up right as the screen disappears that says the application failed? What happens when you see something that's like 1,000 times worse pop up on your screen. And not just on your screen, but what if all the systems and services around you in your dispatch center seem to be failing? And the other 911 operators in your center are starting to see the same screen on their desktop. It's this point when reality is setting in and you're realizing that this is actually happening. What are you going to do? What's the plan? Who are you going to call? Well, then you realize that it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. So now you see that the cost is whatever number, in this case, maybe $25,000. And it says if you don't respond by a certain period of time, that it's going to double. So as a side note, it's never recommended by any industry to pay that ransom. And I know that the news lately has had some examples where ransoms were paid, and now we're seeing that the government's actually taken some of those ransom payments away from the perpetrators of the most recent ransomware attacks. But this event that I'm referring to actually involved several three-letter agencies throughout the state, and ultimately involved the immediate response of a systems isolation crew, remotely, as well as dispatch of a remote team to go on site to one of our clients where we had lost 8 servers, CPE servers, as well as 20 911 call handling workstations, which were split between 4 PSAPs in a high call volume dispatch center in the Midwest. We had to rebuild every single station from the bare metal to freshly installed call handling interfaces. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot that I'm not addressing here and not mentioning just in general, because this is not meant to be a technical education session. There are plenty of them on ransomware. And I would recommend that all of your dispatch centers be engaging in appropriate training to deal with, the first indication of an infection, whether it's a ransomware or some other compromise, because these things are happening more and more these days in every industry. So make sure that you're getting training, and it can be just as easy as going online and doing a YouTube training session. But keep in mind, you don't want to do that on systems that you're not authorized to go online, because it's incredibly dangerous on the internet right now. So if you'd like to have more information or you have questions related to this ransomware event, I'll be happy to open our response notes with you, and you can just send me an email at cw@indigital.net. That's cw@indigital.net. But I wanted to go on a little bit further with this particular event, because how many of you heard about this ransomware attack? I'm going to venture to guess that none of you did, unless you were directly involved with it. And you know why that is. And that's what I'm going to talk about after these next couple of slides. But this event could have catapulted that 911 center and in digital into the national spotlight. It wouldn't have been a pleasurable experience. But it didn't, because we had a backup solution, a backup system that immediately took over call processing and actually didn't miss any calls. And that system you all heard about earlier in the Dare to Be Great sessions from, I think it was Shane and Larry Stidham. It's Mevo. And I've determined, because of the lengthy presentation of the Mevo backup system that they gave, I'm just going to cover it briefly in general. So beyond the ransomware issue that we know is going to happen, there are other events that can take your PSAPs offline. I'll simply say this. I've been in dispatch centers when systems outages have occurred. I have vivid memories of events that unfolded, the questions that were asked, the statements that were made, the commands that were given, the comments, such as, when was the last call? Have you received any 911 calls lately? Is the admin telephone number working okay? Somebody somebody try to dial 911, see if it's ringing. Somebody try to dial an admin number. And really, you're trying to figure out if there's a communication systems problem. And that should never happen. But it usually will result in you calling your phone company or your system service provider. And it could be a number of different places that you have to call. There's just not enough time in the dispatch center in any PSAP or emergency communication center across the nation to make those calls. So I'll ask this question, and I already know the answer to, and so do you, but what are the most essential systems at your agency that are used to answer and dispatch the call? I mean, you're not going to be able to get help to somebody if your trunks are down, any one of them, whether they're 911 or administrative lines. And that's really the goal, is to be able to get help to people who need it, to save, to make that save. I heard one of the sessions from the cradle to the grave or something like that. I mean, you guys are driven to help us when we need help. And we're driven at InDigital to make sure that you have the tools and resources available to get it done. So there are two systems that you need to be able to make it happen: your 911 trunks and your admin phone systems. Now, that's not to relegate the radio systems to not necessary. I understand those are necessary, but you can't get help to somebody you don't know needs help. So Mevo, the system that was presented several times, and we love Mevo at InDigital because you know what? It allows us to get that call delivered to you guys. And there are no other companies in the market space today who do anything like this. And when I say companies, I'm talking about your 911 system service providers. None of the telephone companies, none of the other service providers do this. I can't state that enough. Without Mevo, we would have been in the headlines in a very negative way, just like the rest of, or a majority, I would say all, of the system service providers are today. They're always in the news for systems outages. But the Mevo system is really a one-of-a-kind solution, and it truly is only available from InDigital that overcomes 911 and admin phone system outages. So I'm sort of going to drop the mic here because it's that easy. Mevo is the answer today. InDigital is the only 911 system service provider that's making this happen. So thank you for your attention this morning, but remember, I can only lead you to the water. I can't make you drink. So if you want some more information on Mevo, or you'd like to ask me some other questions related to the ransomware or other service issues, drop me a message at cw@indigital.net and I'll share further details. I yield my time to others. Sarah?
Oh, hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you, Kurt. That was awesome. And thanks for sharing that story at the beginning. I think it really puts things into perspective.
Yeah. You know, my head is nearly healed. my broken leg is good, but the rest will take some time, I'm sure.
How long ago was that?
I think it was between 8 and 10 years ago. Some loss of memory there, you know.
So Kurt and I met earlier today in the green room for the first time. And Kurt, you have one of my favorite kinds of senses of humor.
Oh, I think you mean I don't have one?
It's just like sneaks up on you.
It surprises me sometimes.
Oh my gosh. I told you this before. I just love working with engineers. It's my favorite thing. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? I think that this is just a really great topic. It's huge right now. And I feel like, if you watch the news, it's happening more and more, and we're learning how to deal with it. Yeah, like what the best practices are. And with our 911 networks, it's a huge, huge concern.
Well, interesting that at this particular site that I was referencing, we had literally just implemented a standalone as a local regional ESINet we had just moved the CPE traffic off. So originally, this county was sharing a county-wide fiber network that was starting to concern everybody. So we built a new network in parallel to it, and I think it was 2 weeks before the ransomware hit that it had been running on the new network, where the 911 next gen 911 system was running natively by itself. It was no longer sharing space with the CAD systems or the county system. So had this ransomware event happened 2 weeks prior, the entire government of that particular county would have suffered massive losses. I mean, the entire CAD system, all the computer systems throughout the county. And because we had separated those networks, and it really is, it's not just recommended, it's a mandatory assignment for everybody out there. If you're sharing IP network space with your systems, separate them. And then, as far as the Mevo system is concerned, make sure you've got a secondary path. Make sure you've got a third path, that tertiary path. As much network as you can at your 911 system, because you guys are the core of the county. Nothing happens in the county without telecommunicators being able to use radio and make telephone calls and receive those emergency calls. And when things stop there, it stops everywhere in the county, and people suffer, lives can be lost. So it's a real issue. And I know we really beat Mevo to death, but it does save the day everywhere we deploy it. There's not one single system that or one single county that we service that does not have a Mevo phone on the desk. And the reason is because it works. It always works when primary systems are down, and they're always going down. We see it all the time.
I've seen it, and I've seen Mevo save the day. You should put
it's
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It should come with its own superhero cape when you install them.
Yeah.
There's an idea. Larry, I know you're out there.
Well, I think somebody's put a rescue. It looks like one of the things they throw off the boat to you.
Oh yeah, like a life raft.
Yes. That's what it is.
That's also appropriate.
Anyway, yeah, I could give you numerous examples of this, but it boils down to make sure you have a secondary system. Make sure you're putting together a continuity of operating plan. It has to happen.
Yes. It's funny, we were talking before we went live. So I live in Florida, and Kurt was talking about he could live in Florida because there's only one main highway in and out of the state should anything happen, like a zombie apocalypse or something. So we're talking about just like in the interstate system, you want dual or tertiary routes for your data to ride on, just in case.
Living in Florida makes me feel like panicking. It just makes me start fidgeting a lot because I can't get out of the state once I'm there.
That's why you need a boat.
But it's just like networking. That's a good point. But then you got to be by the coast. I mean, you got to have that last mile connection, right? So yeah. It's very important. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Those three words have very significant meaning and are appropriate for our industry and our lives in general. When we were setting this session up, my primary network connection was trash, so I switched over to an LTE connection, and that's where I'm running from right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We wouldn't be having the session without it. So there you go. Yep. And, I think a lot of people, we talk about next gen or talking about this technology, and it's causing a lot of anxiety, which, totally understandable, but it's things like this too. There's so many aspects of implementing a next gen network that we don't even think about as much. We're thinking about, what's coming into the PSAP, obviously, but things like this having this protection from ransomware, having these backup systems. These are all things that are also coming with next gen that's available right now today.
That's
so
right.
it's important that we talk about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Sarah. Most people, when they're talking about antivirus and IP security, anything like even Windows Defender, I mean, it's always focused on protecting the asset, the computer itself or the servers. I honestly don't know that you can protect them 100%. My opinion is they're going to be infected. They're going to down. Something's going to happen to your system that makes it inoperable for you, whether it's a, power glitch or whatever it is. You have to have another path for your communications. However you do that, I mean, there's a number of different ways. I mentioned with off-the-shelf technology. It really is. Any reasonably decent IT guy would be able to, really engineer a solution that would work for a PSAP. But you really want to have your backup platform up higher in the network. So at Indigital, what we've built with Mevo is so our IP selective router sits up in the as and right next to it, but yet out of band, is the Mevo host. So they're not even dependent on one another. It's really where you end up getting the redundancy and offering the resiliency. It's up high. It's like all at the top of the network.
Yeah, I've heard stories where people didn't even know there's anything wrong with their network until the Mevo phone rang, and it was just like seamless.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said about the next gen core services, the policy routing, the geo routing. There's, like you said, everything's really beginning to snowball as far as the technology is concerned. We even have actually delivered wireless calls to a PSAP, I think it was actually in Michigan, with I3 data. So the call was coming in with latitude and longitude in the header, and they weren't doing outlet lookups. So things are happening fast, and we're just having a great time doing this and making sure that you can get your jobs done and save lives.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kurt. Any questions? I don't see any questions in the question area. But yeah, thank you. This is very informative and awesome. And thank you again to Indigital for being a diamond sponsor of Dare to Be Great. And yeah, lots more to come today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you later.